In the year 2012, everyone was wearing hoodies. They were remembering Trayvon, who had died, sadly, at the hands of a self-appointed vigilante. 2012, I was also working as a journalist and basically a historian, telling the stories of people in Philadelphia and people who impacted Philadelphia. In that role, I had a chance to speak to a person who was a page out of the history books. That person was Rodney King. Rodney King, as many folk in here, just based on the audible, had been savagely beaten by the Los Angeles Police Department, several officers who thought they could get away with it, but were not able to because in the early days of video cameras, someone captured the brutality and shared it. And it was a video that was shown around the world. When Rodney King came out of his coma, he found out that others knew. Those officers were charged. That was 1991. The following year, those officers were acquitted. And the residents of LA simply and justifiably lost it. Riots lasted for over 3 days, to the point that Rodney King was finally brought into one of the press conferences, and he said 5 words: "Can we all get along?" Those 5 words brought 2 levels of attention. There were folk who hated what he said, and there were folk who applauded what he said. Rodney King continued to live his life. And in the year 2012, several weeks after Trayvon Martin's murder by a self-appointed vigilante, Rodney King's autobiography was being released, and I saw that as my window of opportunity to speak, engage with this page out of history. It was 20 years since he was also in the same situation that Trayvon Martin found himself in. And so Rodney's voice came from a bed of knowledge, a real intimate knowledge. We started out our conversation with him in his kitchen and cracking a beverage while looking at his pool in his property, $1 million plus home in LA that he could only acquire after he won his civil suit against the police officers who had brutalized him. He was proud of his home. He was so happy about that pool. And what would normally be a 20-minute conversation turned into an hour plus. Normally, when people obtain fame, legit and sometimes and often illegit, they have a way about them. They know how to basically answer every question and kind of get things out the way. They sort of talk according to script. Rodney was not that way. He was really just an average guy who had been caught up in extraordinary circumstances. And so we talked. And there were times when he went silent as though he were reflecting on unseen episodes in his life that he couldn't share, but he would remember. And he would make a noise, and he would sip his drink, and we would explore other paths of his life. He was so happy about his family. He was happy that he had been able to escape addiction. He had some regrets. One of them was the reality show that he had taken part of, which added to more misery in his life than anything. But we were at this point where he is now telling his life story. And somewhere between the quiet and the revelations, he continued to refer to himself as an American Negro. Now, that was an odd term. Not that I hadn't heard the term Negro before, but I had only heard it basically from very, very old people or from folk who were using it as a substitute for a more divisive word. After he referred to himself as an American Negro, maybe about 6, 7, maybe 8 times, I said, "Why do you call yourself that?" He said, "Because that's what I am. American Negro is on my birth certificate. American Negro is what my parents are. I don't have a problem with Black or African American. But if America is going to do right by the Black man or the African American woman, they have to first do right by the American Negro." A light bulb went off, went over. It's almost like the cartoons, that bing. I don't ever recall being so impressed by the simplicity and depth of a statement. Because he wasn't saying it for applause, this was his reality, and it was actually a very sincere truth. To which I responded in a way that I never do, because I don't make promises. I said, "We're going to find a way to tell that part of your story. We're going to find a way to talk about the American Negro and their place in history." We finished our conversation, and I really felt like I had met someone. It was totally unusual in terms of the interviews that I normally did. Now, just as a little background, I've been a journalist for, at this point, 4 decades. I've spoken to thousands of people. I've written thousands of stories. But I've never made that kind of promise. Several weeks go by, and I'm in the office, and there's a bulletin. And it says that Rodney King has been found dead, drowned in the bottom of his beloved pool. I immediately reached out to my editor and said, "I want to write his obituary," because I knew he had a story to still tell. And so with that, I wrote his obituary, and I made sure to include that he considered himself an American Negro, which is what brings us back to what brings me here. Because when we talk about bravery, we often think about the big steps and the big actions. Who has taken up the sword to fight against injustice, against evil, against wrong? But oftentimes bravery is not about being bold. Oftentimes bravery is about being quiet. It is about listening. It is about getting past the noise and finding that element of truth. And for me, as a journalist, I've found that I am my most brave when I share those stories that others refuse to see or hear, knowing that one person somewhere will hear it, will feel it, and will share it. And I thank you.